So could I just start by asking, probably, Jun, based on what you were originally saying, could you define for me what human dignity is in a Christian context?
Well, I would say that human dignity in a Christian context, well, we understand it as, a value that you attach to human life that is inherent in the sense that it's inherent because God sets us apart. God created us in His image and in His likeness. So, you have some value. That's what I would say.
Okay.
That you are unlike the rest of the animals.
Okay. And based on this sense of human dignity, do you think that the Bible itself gives a kind of coherent base argument for why all human beings are equal just from the get-go?
Yeah. I mean...
And so would you want then to argue that through time we've just been really, really horrible about trying to realize that in...
Yeah, sadly true, yeah.
So what makes you feel as if today you have arrived at a correct interpretation of those biblical ideas of dignity, where these past people who have also been working from the same text have made the same claim, but you would now say we're incorrectly reading that? Do you feel like there's any kind of do you feel like there's any issue making that kind of a claim?
Are you saying that people in the past have looked at the Bible and say that there is no inherent human dignity?
No. So, for instance, human dignity, I would assume for you would mean, for instance, that we don't enslave each other. Like, so slavery would be something that would be acting against someone's inherent human dignity.
Well, I would first ask you what exactly do you mean by slavery?
I mean it's true. In different historical contexts, it's been different.
Right.
I'm trying to say slavery within the context of someone living under an unwillful bondage under another human being.
Yeah.
So, and through history, have there not been times where people have used those biblical texts in ways that have at least condoned those kind of practices while still believing in a sense of human dignity?
Yeah. Well, I think, we are all sinners. I'm a sinner. I know I'm a sinner. I think a lot of Christians, all Christians, as well as it is like when the Bible says we're sinners. We do wrong things all the time. Maybe I do more wrong things than most people. But I don't think that in itself contradicts that God is good, that the Bible is wrong. I mean, there are cases, for example, in the Bible in the Old Testament where there was, servanthood. There is a slave. So the word slave is used, but I don't think it was ever an unwillful thing. I mean, the masters are commanded to treat their slaves humanely, and every 7 years you're supposed to set them free.
Well, I will first point out the fact that historically there were people through warfare. I mean, it wasn't a racial slavery by any means, but in the Roman Empire there were people taken against their will because they were conquered peoples into slavery, and so...
No, I agree. But my point is that the Bible doesn't teach that, when Paul tells the masters to treat your servants, to look at themselves as slaves for Christ, as servants for Christ. And there was never, people did wrong things against each other.
But so, I mean, it sounds wonderful to be able to tell someone who's a master to treat your slave as some sort of a wonderful human being who you care deeply about. But the keeping of the slave itself, why not have Paul in? If Paul is supposed to be someone who's trying to give kind of an ethical imperative to his community, I question why Paul would, in that kind of situation, tell them to be meek and helpful and nice and all those good things.
I think you're not really understanding the model. I mean, would you think it's a problem if, someone works for you and you treat them well? I don't see a problem.
But it's not working for them in the same kind of a sense under slavery. What I'm trying to get at is the fact that the Bible has been interpreted in different ways through history. It's very easy at any particular point in time to say we have arrived at the correct interpretation of the Bible. And yet generation after generation that has changed, and that's because our ability as human beings, our cultures have changed over time. We've been able to do things like women's suffrage. In our own country, we're trying to equalize the pay across genders. We're having a more expansive understanding of human sexuality, and these kinds of expansions are not necessarily taking place because we derive them from any text. And any amount of ethical progression that has occurred within religious communities is because we are taking those ethical changes and applying them onto those texts in a different manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, so now if I can have some intrepid volunteers to move the podium. Yep. Thank you. We'll open the floor to Q&A. I'm going to establish some basic ground rules. I know that most of these are probably common sense, but we'll let people ask one question, so no follow-ups, just so that we have time for everybody to ask at least one question if they'd like. The panelists can ask for points of clarification. That's not necessarily an invitation to ask a second question, but for you to clarify. Please no ad hominem attacks. This is a space to actually explore these ideas and to push a little bit, push back a little bit, make them defend themselves, but don't be mean to them. They volunteer their time to also stand right here. And so I will call on people. We'll start right here. And if you could say your name first, I think it'd be nice to those on the floor.
My name is Brandon. I'm also a physics major. I was born in a Catholic home. I was baptized Catholic, and now I'm also an atheist. My question is to Shuni. How do you, as an intellectually honest physicist, grapple with the notion of free will, and moreover, its internal inconsistencies, and also its inherent contradictions with both the anthropomorphic deity that you subscribe to, and also all the physics that you've learned throughout the years?
Okay, so let me just, the first one is free will, right? Okay, so I think I wouldn't say that, free will, again, first off, I believe absolutely in free will, and I think the Bible also teaches that, humans do have free will. I believe that God is completely sovereign, that he knows all things, he controls all things. And the way I look at it is, from my point of view, from a completely practical, for all practical purposes, I think there is free will, because I don't know, the future, for the same, for anything. But, I do believe that God knows everything.
Predict the future in physics, pretty much?
Yeah.
You throw a ball at, a certain velocity with a
Right,
certain angle
right.
of elevation, you know where it'll land to get confirmation.
Yeah, so I think you can do that. I don't see what's
Why
wrong.
don't we just a sack of particles?
So what?
Sorry.
No, I think you, for all practical purposes, because you can't predict the future, you have absolute free will in that sense. Does that make sense to you? I'm not sure if I'm getting to what you're really asking. Because I can choose things. I can choose what I want to do. I can choose, whether or not I want to throw a ball or I want to kick the ball. I'm not sure if I'm really getting to it.
Well, I think we sort of agree on free will from a practical standpoint, in that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. However, it does come into play, brought up the problem, but we never got a chance to address it, and that we are not truly sovereign in the sense of true libertarian free will, and that if God knows what we're going to do, it actually doesn't say anything about the problem of evil. Because God knows what's going to happen, he knows evil is going to occur, and yet he doesn't step in to prevent it, doesn't give us evidence to change our mind. And so from a practical standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, if we want to talk about, literal free will, when do you make a decision, when you not make a decision, there's conflicting accounts. It doesn't really affect how we make decisions, but it does affect the problem of evil.
Right. So with regards to the problem of evil, as Christians, I think we all understand that evil came into the world because of our sin, and our sin, the first sin was, Adam and Eve. They ate the forbidden fruit. And I think the way we understand sin, it might be a little different from how most people would perceive it to be. In the sense that I think the first sin was, the sin of pride, because Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, and the temptation for them was to eat the fruit, to gain knowledge and to be like gods. So the whole idea of sin is that, it's a sin of pride that we think we can be independent from God, that we think that we know better than God when God says not to eat the tree, and eat of the fruit of the tree, and we eat of the fruit of the tree. So I would say, from what we understand, the problem of evil is something which we bring on ourselves because we chose, in our own pride, to want to live away from God, to live independently from God, to want to be like God. And in that sense, because we become so self-centered when God is not in our life, that we bring a lot of the evil and suffering on ourselves. So the second part, what was the second part again, Brandon? Should I go back?
We'll move on to another question so you can have everybody participate. In the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate.
Name, what's your name?
Sorry, my name is Ben. I'm a second year in college. I appreciate your guys' attempt to, bringing up the, I think, essential question or a prerequisite question to this question of what are the standards by which we judge something to be true? I'm curious, what are the shortcomings of the scientific method, if any? That is, or maybe the question I'm really trying to get at is, are there questions the scientific method cannot answer? And if so, or if not, how do you know?
That's a good question. I would say that there are more things the scientific method can answer than a lot of people might. But of course there are questions it can't. What is the square root of a meatloaf? Or how am I going to kill this bottle of water?
Did you have meatloaf for dinner?
I'm hungry. Pub everywhere. Everybody run the pub tonight. Yeah, so there are nonsensical questions.
Of course. Yeah.
So I would consider the word supernatural to be nonsensical. If it occurs in the natural world, if it's observable in any way, it's natural and it's purview to the subject of science. If there was a miracle that could happen or if there was a God, and we call him supernatural, that's fine. But that would have to be accounted for in our view of the natural world. If there's a God that can come in, we'd have to amend all of Newton's laws of motion. First law of motion, unless God changes it. That's fine. Then it's at least consistent. God is natural. God would be natural. If we want to talk about like Tillich's God, which is existence itself, fine. I don't care. You can rename things, but that isn't really a question about the natural world. So I'd say nonsensical questions and things that are just linguistic tricks.
I guess can I follow that?
No follow-ups, please. Josh, I think you had something to say that, right?
I mean, I was going to make sure that, I was just making sure that Ben had gotten to the point that he was trying to get at, which was that you think for any questions that are not nonsensical or not based on supernatural assumptions, then any other questions can be kind of introduced through the scientific method.
Anything observable, anything relevant.
Does that answer what you were asking about?
To an extent. I mean, is a question like what is love? So I know a question maybe that might be outside the scope of this debate. Is that a type of question that can be answered by the scientific method, or does it fall into a separate category from nonsensical and the other category that you gave it?
So what I would want to say is that it's not entirely a separate category by any means. I mean, there are certain. I would want to say that we can describe certain processes that happen, brain chemistry and that kind of thing that happen during the process when we are in love, though I would not want to say that that's the only thing that's happening there. I mean, I want I don't want to be that much of a I don't want to break it down quite that much.
I'll take one from this side.